God and God's Son Jesus Christ bless you all. Being Christian do not mean to be ignorant and uninformed. Information is power, information is help and guidance. By now, you probably know that Americans waste a lot of food. Each year, an estimated 133 billion pounds of food that farmers grow never makes it to our plates. That's enough to fill 44 skyscrapers. And tons of it ends up in landfills, where it emits methane, a greenhouse gas. Let's see who is doing something and how they accept the great waste of personal wealth and resources in general. The Obama administration has set a goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And, as we've reported, there are lots of efforts underway from sales of ugly produce to the EPA's Food Recovery Challenge, aimed at diverting excess food from landfills to hungry mouths and other uses, like composting. Even religious groups are joining the battle against food waste. But, what's been lacking is a comprehensive plan to identify the most cost-effective approaches. Now, a new data-driven roadmap to reduce food waste aims to fill the void. The roadmap is the creation of a big group of collaborators including food businesses, environmentalists, anti-hunger organizations, policymakers, and investors. Seriously. What about educate kids to buy and use up just what they need? To understand labels and expiration dates and have a really good grip on buying impulses. Generational understanding and education will have even better example. Personal example and behavior means a lot for a kid. But reducing food waste is one of the most tangible ways we can all help contribute to a healthier planet, says Sarah Vaird, Interim Director of WIEWRS, the group that created the roadmap. The roadmap identifies actions that can be taken today, says Vaird. I am wondering how much that will cost taxpayers. How much will cost the working class? How much they will steal from millions of paychecks for expertise of this group's and so-called think tank. Who will tell and explain us the obvious? But let's see what they conventionally tell us. Elaborate for us to better understand why we need them. The importance of their existence and what are the roots of our problems according to their studies. So let's see further, their way. The roadmap ranks 27 strategies. On the WIEWRS site, you can scroll through the tabs of the interactive chart to explore the different metrics you can use to rank the effectiveness of a strategy, from emissions reduced to water saved to jobs created to economic benefit per ton of waste. Warning: you can spend some serious time toggling through these graphs. So, what's at the top of the list for its potential to divert food waste? Number 1 is centralized composting. Think of a Seattle-style approach, where food waste doesn't go into trash, but to composting facilities. Food waste recycling solutions like large-scale composting and anaerobic digestion have the potential to divert 9.5 million tons of food scraps from landfills every year, says Chris Hunt, who serves on REEF's Advisory Council. He has written an analysis of the roadmap that explains how reducing food waste can also reduce the environmental impacts. One example: a recycling and composting program at Assumption College in Massachusetts resulted in a reduction of 90 tons of refuse from landfills, according to Deborah Hecker, vice president at Sodexo, a multinational food services company that is part of the WIEWRS collaboration. Another approach that could potentially lower our grocery bills: standardized date labeling on food packages. You know all those sell by, and best before dates stamped on food labels? As we've reported, those dates indicate when a food tastes best. They have nothing to do with food safety. But many consumers don't know that, and that confusion leads Americans to toss out about $29 billion worth of perfectly good food each year, according to WIEWRS estimates. For instance, who knew that eggs are often good for 3 to 5 weeks after the date stamped on the box? Giving people information to make small changes to waste less can actually add up to make a huge difference, says Dana Gunders, the author of the Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook. Gunders says there are a lot of efforts underway to address date labels. Walmart has devised its own standardized labeling for private label products, such as its Great Value house brand. And the Grocery Manufacturers Association and other food industry groups may help create voluntary guidelines for date labels. U.S. Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, a Democrat from Maine, has introduced legislation aimed at creating a standard date labeling guideline for food. Entrepreneurs and investors, take note, some solutions to food waste identified in the roadmap lend themselves to business innovation and investment, rather than consumer action. For instance, there's modifying food packaging to optimize consumption. One idea: how about creating compostable salad bags, so that plastic bags of lettuce don't end up in landfills? Another idea: developing value-added processing facilities that turn surplus foods that might otherwise be wasted into products such as soups, sauces and jams. For example, Whole Foods already makes smoothies from ugly and excess fruits, but the RFED folks can foresee large-scale operations that focus on these efforts. There are a lot of ways to create economic value by thinking anew about these challenges, says Eric Kessler, head of Arabella Advisors Food Practice, a consultancy for philanthropists and investors in the food sector. From building demand for ugly produce to collecting spent brewery grains and selling it as animal feed, solving the food waste crisis should be an economic and employment windfall, Kessler tells us. Churches can go on educate and practice. For instance, when these organizations hold potlucks, the leftovers can go to the local food bank. Groups can also work with local grocers, schools, and restaurants to direct food to food banks and shelters that would otherwise be wasted. They can hold seminars for the faithful and the broader local community to teach them how to menu plan and shop their own refrigerators first to avoid buying excess food, and how to compost the leftover scraps. Wondering why not encourage communities where is possible to create gardens and small farming lands. They can use leftovers as compost for natural fertilizer. Benefit will be maybe better community construction and free bags of fresh vegetables or fruits. Even Pope Francis get in the conversation, and he expressed in Climate Change a Principal Challenge for Humanity. Tell us, climate change is a global problem with far-reaching environmental and social consequences, especially for the poor. He blamed apathy and greed and called on developing countries to limit the use of non-renewable energy and to assist poorer nations. Those who possess more resources and economic or political power seem mostly to be concerned with masking the problems or concealing their symptoms. He called on humanity to collectively acknowledge a sense of responsibility for our fellow men and women upon which all civil society is founded. The earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. In many parts of the planet, the elderly lament that once beautiful landscapes are now covered with rubbish. Industrial waste and chemical products utilized in cities and agricultural areas can lead to bioaccumulation in the organisms of the local population, even when levels of toxins in those places are low. Frequently no measures are taken until after people's health has been irreversibly affected. But our industrial system, at the end of its cycle of production and consumption, has not developed the capacity to absorb and reuse waste and byproducts. We have not yet managed to adopt a circular model of production capable of preserving resources for present and future generations, while limiting as much as possible the use of non-renewable resources, moderating their consumption, maximizing their efficient use, reusing and recycling them. A very solid scientific consensus indicates that we are presently witnessing a disturbing warming of the climatic system. In recent decades, this warming has been accompanied by a constant rise in the sea level and, it would appear, by an increase of extreme weather events, even if a scientifically determinable cause cannot be assigned to each particular phenomenon. Humanity is called to recognize the need for changes of lifestyle, production, and consumption, in order to combat this warming or at least the human causes which produce or aggravate it. It is true that there are other factors, such as volcanic activity, variations in the Earth's orbit and axis, the solar cycle, yet a number of scientific studies indicate that most global warming in recent decades is due to the great concentration of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxides, and others, released mainly as a result of human activity. If present trends continue, this century may well witness extraordinary climate change and an unprecedented destruction of ecosystems, with serious consequences for all of us. A rise in the sea level, for example, can create extremely serious situations, if we consider that a quarter of the world's population lives on the coast or nearby, and that the majority of our megacities are situated in coastal areas. Nowadays, for example, we are conscious of the disproportionate and unruly growth of many cities, which have become unhealthy to live in, not only because of pollution caused by toxic emissions but also as a result of urban chaos, poor transportation, and visual pollution and noise. Many cities are huge, inefficient structures, excessively wasteful of energy and water. Neighborhoods, even those recently built, are congested, chaotic and lacking in sufficient green space. We were not meant to be inundated by cement, asphalt, glass, and metal, and deprived of physical contact with nature. Instead of resolving the problems of the poor and thinking of how the world can be different, some can only propose a reduction in the birth rate. At times, developing countries face forms of international pressure which make economic assistance contingent on certain policies of reproductive health. Yet while it is true that an unequal distribution of the population and of available resources creates obstacles to development and a sustainable use of the environment, it must nonetheless be recognized that demographic growth is fully compatible with an integral and shared development. To blame population growth instead of extreme and selective consumerism on the part of some, is one way of refusing to face the issues. We are not God. The earth was here before us and it has been given to us. This allows us to respond to the charge that Judeo-Christian thinking, on the basis of the Genesis account which grants man dominion over the earth, cf. Gen 1:28, has encouraged the unbridled exploitation of nature by painting him as domineering and destructive by nature. This is not a correct interpretation of the Bible as understood by the Church. Although it is true that we Christians have at times incorrectly interpreted the Scriptures, Nowadays we must forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over the earth justifies absolute domination over other creatures. The biblical texts are to be read in their context, with an appropriate hermeneutic, recognizing that they tell us to till and keep the garden of the world, cf. Gen 2:15. Tilling refers to cultivating, plowing or working, while keeping means caring, protecting, overseeing, and preserving. This implies a relationship of mutual responsibility between human beings and nature. The strategy of buying and selling carbon credits can lead to a new form of speculation which would not help reduce the emission of polluting gases worldwide. This system seems to provide a quick and easy solution under the guise of a certain commitment to the environment, but in no way does it allow for the radical change which present circumstances require. Rather, it may simply become a ploy which permits maintaining the excessive consumption of some countries and sectors. A politics concerned with immediate results, supported by consumerist sectors of the population, is driven to produce short-term growth. In response to electoral interests, governments are reluctant to upset the public with measures which could affect the level of consumption or create risks for foreign investment. The myopia of power politics delays the inclusion of a far-sighted environmental agenda within the overall agenda of governments. They are nice words and not much solutions and examples what to do. Where is some action? Are so-called leaders political or spiritual? I do not imply that we have to be mesmerized by them. But for those who are, or need to be leaded, controlled and walk truth. I know and you can see it. No real practical solutions, but lest the Pope try to make masses aware, and he took some position towards, more. Expressing himself along the Jesus Christ-like thinking, I am hoping for rolling some actions too. But hey, hoping there are more energized people who get charged by some fancy rhetoric. We all can better ourselves and each other too, by looking into community farming actions. Buy houses, churches, schools, especially the last two, they can lead. They are depending on us people. Who form them? They will be nowhere without people. So yes, you all individually and group-wise you have decision power. So they could have a gardens with greenhouses, where people can create their own gardens and the outcome. List get fresh air, exercise, and be in more human contact with their closer community members, making more friends and maintaining more quality friendships. With extra bonus. Yes. If they can make nice fresh vegetable soup in their kitchens, on cheap and less polluted with farming industry goodies, yuck. Maybe where no farming possible, how about planting trees together? It is a lot of land, just be creative. Mentioning trees, I'm not talking decor. Plant fruit trees everywhere is possible, even on the roadsides, apples, peaches, apricots, prunes, cherries, so on. When they bloom they are beautiful, and when is the season they make yummy fruits. Fresh or dried, who can beat your own quality and price? God and His Son Jesus Christ bless you all. God and God's Son Jesus Christ bless you all. Being Christian do not mean to be ignorant and uninformed. Information is power, information is help and guidance. By now, you probably know that Americans waste a lot of food. Each year,